Hi, my name is Dean Willie. First and foremost, if you're not into spiritual things or beliefs, this will be pointless reading this. I don't want to get into debates regarding different perceptions of reality. For those who truly know me will realise I am or was quite religious. I decided to leave Christianity on March 2nd after 28 years. People don't realise, but I had a genuine conversion. In 1998, I was 20 years old and I had a lot of peace and prosperity. Felt the presence of God frequently. For about 8 years, I experienced probably all facets of the God of the Bible in this reality. The peace that surpassed all understanding, realising now it was a piece of confusion and too clean. I prayed for a woman once with back problems who was healed. I had dreams. I also definitely changed and almost became Stepford-like. Then 8 years into it, I became addicted to cannabis. Cannabis is sorcery or pharmakia in the Greek. In essence, from that point on, it changed my thoughts, gave me mental health issues. But in hindsight, it was a blessing in disguise. As since I have had this spiritual awakening, I am no longer addicted to it. The only effect it has on me now is it induces a pleasant trance, which is useful for meditation. However, there's no urgency anymore, as I'm always at peace. No more OCD, no more depression. Anxiety is mostly gone. I think, though, it's just a sense of readjustment to this new norm. However, weed at that time had essentially short-circuited my pass key for the special or sacred place. I had become defiled spiritually or unholy and most likely took on a spirit or two, as I mostly just experienced despair, mental health issues from then on, and which is a far cry from my initial redemptive state. The only relief I would get is when I went to church and I could feel God's presence. However, it was always an outside looking in experience. From that point on, I'd feel God's presence for about a day afterwards, then mental health struggles until I went to a prayer meeting or Bible study midweek. And this revolving door ritual attempting to appease God was tiresome and loathsome after a long time. I probably did this for 20 years. I kind of had a suspicion I had apostated, as a church prophet said he couldn't sense the Holy Spirit in me in 2008. To his credit, he was highly accurate when detailing people's lives, so this news only added to my despair. I lost my dad in 2007 to alcoholism and my brother in 2018 to melanoma, now also having kidney disease, rejections, and literally being on death's door. I thought I'm 48, I can't attract women, barely had sex. This whole time during my life, it caused me to crack. Amongst other things, I was utterly convinced I had become apostate. So knowing that, asking for answered prayer was futile, and all the prayer I yielded no longer healed my mental problems or mental health issues. In a moment of utter despair and darkness, I made an impulsive and radical decision, do a 180 and bat for the other team, the divine feminine. So it's not a bad thing in hindsight, as it finally propelled me to make a leap of faith. And it's so amazing, it's like a dream I'm hoping I never wake up from. I have been deconstructing my faith for a while, and even simultaneously looking into hidden knowledge. Also, why is hidden knowledge hidden, and why are people so afraid to read it? For me, I was always told that sin of death in one of John's writings was a person becoming a Gnostic or believing in Gnosis beliefs. So I always had that stopgap programming. It was fear forbidding me to explore the actual truth. As Yahweh is afraid, you will wake up. Before I proceed, I will reiterate that I could never be an atheist. I was raised in a haunted house with spirits ever present, and my father was like a spirit superconductor, so I had spiritual experiences from a very young age. I've been deconstructing the Bible for a while now, at least 3 years. Before we proceed, we need to look at this key piece of information. The Phoenician word for the god Saturn is Shabbatai, or Shabbat, Sabbath, or affiliated with Yahweh, so both require Saturday worship. This deity has had many incarnations, such as Kronos, Allah, Saturn, Yahweh. Potentially he was also Baal, being both storm warrior and territorial deities, but better known as the Demiurge, or Lel Bedoeth. Have you ever asked yourself why there is barely any female presence in the Bible? Did you ever wonder why women were treated as property? Have you considered how bad, statistically speaking, escaping from the desert with Moses was. Only 2 survived, or maybe 3 in that first generation. I'll have to recheck that. Imagine being an Egyptian escapee leaving with the Israelites only for it to lead to your demise. When you look at Saturn and Yahweh, their personalities and traditions are strikingly similar. Saturn is defined by the cube. Muslims run around the black cube in Mecca, orbiting it, literally. Essentially orbiting the cube in Jewish religion, they wear a black cube on their attire. The planet Saturn has a hexagonal storm located on the north pole of the planet. It's baffling that it can be that shape in terms of our current understanding of physics. In this material world, and ironically, a hexagon is just a cube laid out flat. The Star of David, or Rephaim, is Saturn symbolism, or better known as the Seal of Solomon. It's a key to Solomonic magic, which is really just magic within this cube of Saturn matrix material world, or soul prison basically, hence all the pain, suffering and life without magic. I would also like to mention that Gene Roddenberry of Star Trek fame was quite enlightened. His portrayal of the Borg is the perfect comparison to the Saturnian order of thoughtless law and obedience. Humans no longer in possession of their divine spark or soul. Industrialized prison cube race. Again, the cube reference is intentional as it symbolizes Saturn, Yahweh, Allah, and all those other incarnations. I have this theory that the grey aliens are the evolution of the Saturnian system, being devoid of soul, obedient, sexless, hyper-intelligent, but no divine fire. Bob Lazar had mentioned that in documentation, aliens spoke of humans as soul containers. Perhaps the Greys are trying to get back their soul that Yahweh extinguished, and that is the promised resurrection body. Oh dear. That is strictly my own take, okay, just overthinking as usual. Also in the Yahweh story, started out as a territorial storm war deity amongst the 70 sons of El. Even Deuteronomy implies the world was divided into 70 for the sons of El. Yahweh given his portion of Jacob. You can find this information in the Dead Sea Scrolls as well as the Ugaritic texts. And Deuteronomy. He had a consort named Asherah who was essentially divorced and erased from history. She is the divine feminine, the mother of the planet Earth, also other names known by as Gaia. The Deuteronomists were instructed to erase Asherah's memory from the people by removing her poles, trees, high places, etc. It's important to note that deities get their power from remembrance, faith and belief from humans. What's interesting is the menorah is in fact shaped after the tree of Asherah. I guess Yahweh missed that one. The atrocities and brutality committed by the Old Testament God are appalling. The bar is too high with Abrahamic religions. He was also the Greek god Kronos, one of his few incarnations. So this rabbit hole goes pretty deep. The reason Yahweh would slow the sun in the Old Testament is he had put a spell on the sun. As being the god Kronos, he is also the god of space and time. Biblical Christianity and any of the Abrahamic faiths really, in the end, became a prison of fear and despair. Fear cannot give birth to love, agape. What's interesting is there are some Gnostic teachings in the Bible. Ye are gods. Jesus said that, which is a far cry from what Yahweh says, that there are no other gods before me. The kingdom of heaven is within. Jesus, the divine feminine spark or soul, is within. Be wise as serpents, shrewd as doves. Jesus said that. Yet the serpent is always portrayed as the villain in the Genesis tale, but really they are a symbol of wisdom. The Bible is clearly a contradiction of messages and books, many of which are omitted from the Bible canon, probably because it taught gnosis. Let me elaborate. Love is patient, love is kind, love is long-suffering. However, when Ananias and Sapphira withheld some money from the sale of their property, they were essentially zapped and killed on the spot. How about Moses? Did everything right, then received a death decree because he struck a rock. Or Nadab and Abihu, who brought strange fire, then were destroyed without question by the cube god, whose presence dwelled in the cube, or the ark of the covenant. Clearly this God is out of touch with the human experience. Being in a box, never actually incarnated as a human, simply stole the story of the divine Christ and assimilated it into Hebrew theology. God is not the author of confusion, but sends out a lying spirit to ensure a king dies from lies. But hey, no bearing false witness, okay? Do as I say, not as I do, right? What about David committing murder, adultery and fornication? No stoning for David. But if you were in the desert and committed adultery, there was no caution given. Even though David was given caution, so why the inconsistency? Or how about Lot and his orgy? Again, no stoning for Lot or his daughters, but only a few chapters prior, Lot's wife was turned into a pillar of salt for looking back. Who then committed the more grievous sin? Considering adultery and fornication are punishable by death according to Yahweh's own law. But this didn't happen to Lot and his daughters. When the Israelites were drawn from Egypt by the Israelite God, I'm wondering how they felt knowing they were being conscripted for war. Peace and love. Yep, here we are today fighting wars over deserts. I no longer have to pretend to embrace purity culture or discriminate someone for their sexual preference because a book told me to. Jesus never discriminated people for their sexual orientation. That was Paul, which understandably, due to his Pharisaical education and lifestyle, I found such a new level of freedom now. I'm exploring the divine feminine. They are the gardeners, restorers of the organic life and environment of the planet. It feels like Christmas every morning now. I'm free. I have no malice or judgment. In fact, I'm more loving and peaceful than ever. I've embraced the other side. I also making this to set people free from fear or performance-based religion. So you don't have to go through the fire. Once you experience peace that has no jealousy or expectation, you will experience pure joy. Peace out, brothers and sisters.